All right. So, obviously, stream test. I'm going to need someone to tell me if you can actually hear me. So I know Charon's there. So when this comes through, let me know, because I need to get used to the delay and the settings as well. You know, like the bit rate and all that. So I'll wait for the confirmation from Charon and then I'll just get on with it. And what we're going to be doing in this stream, I might as well tell you if you can hear me, is I'm just going to be going over the stuff that happened in October. So this will mostly be for patrons, but everyone can get involved and then we can have a little chat as well. Okay, Charon says we can hear you. Good. Nice. So let's take a look at this. So hopefully you should be able to see pure ref on the screen now. So what I've got on the left-hand side is what I call my like roundup list. So whenever I put stuff out on YouTube and like resources for the members lounge and all that, I just like make a little list of it for myself on Notion so that when it comes to letting the patrons know what's happened in the month, I just put that out. About 25 seconds, Charon says the delay is. Hi, Agnev as well. Okay, cool. I might need to work on that. I'd like it to be shorter. There is a way you've got like free settings on YouTube, so I'll need to check the bitrate and stuff. Oh, John, hiya. How you doing? So, yeah, this month was interesting. I don't think I got as much done as I wanted to do. It's kind of because uni's kicked off a bit now, and I am still ahead of time for the university stuff, but it's kind of in that lull period at the beginning where you're just kind of getting your footing with the pacing of stuff. So I am managing to get work and university done fine, but it's just kind of finding that balance. But we managed to put out quite a few interesting projects that I'm really happy with. So obviously there was the Alien Embryo style project, and that was kind of like a shading technique test to do with the geometry proximity. You may or may not have seen that one. But these files are all available on the members lounge. So that's curtisholt.online/members. So that's for patrons on the $5 tier and above. So these two ones here, the display case experiment scene and the museum skull art, were mostly to do with an upcoming Afterglow update to do with display cases and thinking of them as lighting domains. So I think that pretty much ticks off those ones. Alien Embryo sculpture assets. Yeah, so the skull project was an interesting one because it's a type of object that I really wanted to do for a while, but they're very difficult ones to sculpt. So I took some inspiration from the Z Anatomy project, which you may or may not know was a kind of like freely available anatomy resource for 3D artists. It's still available. It's just kind of like shifted mode, I suppose. Like the website's changed over time, but it is available, and there's like a kind of educational demonstration program you can use as well to kind of look around the objects. So I tend to list the videos and shorts that are done on here as well. And if you're following me on social media, you'll notice that for a lot of these videos, I put them out on YouTube and then I break them down into their most important clips and then put them onto other social platforms as well. Because one of the things I found over time doing YouTube, sorry, just checking my phone quickly. Okay, is that, you know, a lot of people that used to watch the videos, they don't really get recommended them as much anymore. It's kind of unpredictable. So I started noticing that a lot of the frequent watchers on YouTube started appearing on other platforms and then acting as if they didn't know that the project existed. So what I basically decided to do was that for, you know, all of these videos, all of these interesting projects, I will break down the most important parts of them, and then from there I'll just put them out on the other platforms as well, so that hopefully we'll reach the people that are interested. What I've got over here are just like a few kind of early shots from the display case demo, and this is the Wanderer character from Daniel Bystedt, and it's part of an Eevee demo available on the Blender demo website. So some of the early shots were very basic. You know, this is a Studio Environment 6, I think, from Afterglow, and this is a kind of cubic type display case, but I was making them in all different sizes. But, you know, keeping it to a more limited lighting rig, I suppose that's the word to use, is powerful. And actually, the fewer lights you have, the more interesting it can be in a lot of cases. But obviously, I just kind of pushed it and took it further. Here are the plant assets from BD3D on Superhive. So, yeah, I was quite happy with how that turned out. And it's a good starting point for working more on these kind of display case tools because it gives me ideas for the creative variety of things that I want to do. So if I want to do more realistic renders, that's fine. We can just like limit the stylistic elements in it. But if I wanted to do things more stylized, like, fictional alien life and environments like that, we can treat it like a terrarium of some kind. And I found that, I mean, a lot of people might look at it and go, what's the point of having a display case? If we're rendering objects in 3D, then isn't just 3D the display method? Like, we don't need glass in a 3D space like we do in real life. But I found that there's something interesting about, like, the physical idea of the connection to a render. And that is something that's a bit hard to explain, but I think it kind of ties a bit into how, like a lot of people, myself included, sure, we can have like every book we might ever read on a Kindle, but I think there's just something different about actually holding something, right? It's not just about the information. There's something about an immersive process in engaging with the content you're looking at. And I think there's something important there in the 3D space as well. So it's just something I'm interested in exploring. It's like, okay, well, how can we keep the 3D space kind of providing some of that immersion? I mean, we think about immersion a lot in films and TV shows and video games, in terms of like, oh, the quality, does it look realistic? Does it not? But I feel like in 3D space, we sometimes forget about that a little bit. Maybe not. Depends on kind of where we're looking. So it's just something about that I'm interested in exploring. I mean, the lighting stuff has always been about this kind of physical spatial presence, and it's been a bit hard for some other people to wrap their heads around. Like when I started doing stuff like the Afterglow project, I got a few questions from other product creators that were like, oh, what's the point of this? Like, we've already got HDRIs, we've already got lamps, like, well, it doesn't solve anything. And I'm like, I'm just thinking about something else, like it's a hard thing to describe to people sometimes. Okay, so just a quick note on the members lounge, we have, different categories of things. Like, for example, over in the tools and add-on section, there's the MRI visualizer file and the flipbook packer tool. So if you've got like medical scans, if you've got them in an image format, if you don't have them in an image format, like if they just come straight from the hospital, they might be in a DICOM file format or something like that. There are freely available tools available online to turn them into images. And from there, you can turn them into a flipbook file, which you can use for a visualizer if you're interested in that. I got a little note from Sharon here to talk about Nodevember. So, does anyone remember Nodevember? Nodevember, if you don't know, maybe you're new here, although we haven't really talked about it in a long time. It's a challenge that happens in November where there's a series of prompts, a bit like Inktober, if you know that, or Sculpt January, and every day you do something for the prompt. But in this case, you're making it with nodes. And I think it's quite ambiguous, like it could be shader nodes, geometry nodes, etc. A lot of the time in the past, it was mostly shader nodes. I'm not sure exactly when it started, but it was quite popular. And we ended up with like all sorts of crazy stuff coming out of the community. I think a lot of it, or the most impressive stuff, was to do with vector math, if I'm right, vector displacement. Sharon might be able to kind of make a note about that. I'm not sure. And I believe that Erin are kind of just working on the prompts and stuff to get that started this year. So if I'm right about that, obviously it starts tomorrow because that should be the beginning of November. So if you like the idea of challenges, might be something worth keeping an eye on. Now maybe head on over to Erin's server, Erindale. So what else have we got here? I think I basically covered like most of the stuff that's happened. Okay, so the community material pack had an update that is not public yet. That was a few months ago. Added a few more materials and it cleaned up old ones. And this is a free project. So as part of my Patreon process, where my Patreon wage decides how many hours I work on free projects every month, we have the system where if an update gets done for a free project, it won't be released to the public until the overtime has been paid for. So if I've done more work than the Patreon has paid for, then it'll be held privately until the overtime is paid for. And when I say privately, it's available to the patrons early. So Community Material Pack version 4 was one of those updates, and it's about to go public. So it will depend on exactly what the Patreon wage will be on this tick over to the next month, but it may finally pay for that and make it public. So we'll have to see, maybe this month, maybe next month. But this is basically a system we have going. And I've got like a whole spreadsheet system going where as we're working on free things, I can kind of track how the Patreon wage interacts with the release process and stuff like that. Also, Biogen, we should probably talk about Biogen. So the generative modeling add-on, I don't have a picture for it here. I've done a few videos about it recently. Sharon and I have been working on that, but we're doing it a bit slowly again because like there aren't that many hours being paid for, and we're already in overtime, so we're just kind of chipping away as it goes. And as we do, oh, there's the little thumbnail for the video here. It will make more process. So it's basically in a state now where we have enough to do like a test version, like an alpha or a beta, but there won't be much in the way of actual content in the geometry nodes. So I could sit down and do that now, make that available to the patrons. But again, there won't really be much there. It's on the list, but you know, Sharon and I will sit down and we'll do a bit more and then make it more interesting. I see some more people in the chat. Hi, Vertex Bird, nice to see you. And Phil Hacker, looking forward to November. Sick. I don't know if I'll give it a try this year, though. I tend to miss out on the challenges, to my own disappointment, because back in 2016, I think, yeah, 2016 was my sculpting year when I was learning Blender. And back then, I took part in challenges hosted by Zacharias Reinhardt, who you'll know from CG Boost. Does anyone else watch CG Boost? Do you subscribe to them? They make the courses as well. Yeah, Zacharias Reinhardt and co, or et al, is that the term? Would run a whole bunch of challenges. So there was Sculpt January and the weekly CG challenge. And I took part in a bunch of those, like way before I started doing the YouTube channel, which was 2 years later in 2018. But I learned so much from doing those challenges. And I think some renders from those are still kind of floating around somewhere as well. And then I ended up doing, I won one of the weekly CG challenges, got a few prizes. So that was quite funny. Zacharias Reinhardt was basically like my kind of, I don't really want to say mentor maybe, but like a kind of guiding arm into the YouTube space. Because after that, you know, a little while later, a couple of years after doing some extra projects, I started doing the YouTube channel. And he was one of the first people to kind of say like, hey, you know, welcome to the space. I've got courses. Do you want to do some affiliate type things? We can work together on some things. And yeah, it was kind of nice. So it's nice kind of having these, you know, connections with other YouTubers. Okay, so is there anything else I need to talk about? Render Rides, Agniv says this Biogen update is going to be banger. Yeah, it's interesting. We're kind of making, actually, I should open it up. Give me a sec. We're trying to make it more of a logic tool than an artistic tool, which is not completely accurate to say, because obviously it's Blender, it's an art tool, Biogen is an art tool, etc. But let me just get my Blender open here. If I'm right, yes, that worked. See, I'm getting used to OBS and like having it lock onto the windows properly. Okay, so yeah, it's more of a logic tool in the way of the original versions of Biogen were so like style specific when adding things to objects, and it was inconsistent in that way, in that one effect would have a certain style and then another effect would have a different style, and it was a bit, feels a bit weird. And I like the idea of having some kind of logical consistency to what we're actually doing in terms of geometry nodes. So what you can see here is just we've got the three core pillars being surface, mesh, and volume. Under surface, you've got surface distribution, surface growth. Now, these are quite simple effects, but you kind of get the idea for what I'm saying about the consistency of style and logic. So conceptually imagine that this is the same object every time, and then we can see what's changing on the object. And what this does is when we apply it, it applies a geometry nodes library to the object in the form of a modifier. And then from there, you'll be able to go in and modify it, you know, by the nodes. So there's a big question there of like, when doing a tool like this, why do it like this? Because we've got things like the asset browser, shout out to Afterglow, and, you know, we could just drag nodes in and modify the object like that. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. And we might end up just making all of these node groups as they are anyway. But again, I just think there's something different about the artistic process of clicking object, clicking effect, and clicking a button, and then having it there. And then separately from that, if you are inside of geometry nodes, being able to see the links between nodes and how they come together is, I think, also very important. And in the asset browser, when you're just dragging node groups in, I think you lose a little bit of that logical context. That doesn't have to be the case, because you could just go one layer of abstraction up and say, okay, let's drag in a node group from the asset browser. We expect the user will just open the node group and then they'll be able to see the links between all the logic. And, that's fine. It's not like there's one particular way to do this. But again, I just kind of like the idea of being able to visually see something and apply it. I don't know if I've got the right versions going. Yes, that did work. Okay. So I probably won't be able to do... Again, these effects haven't actually been prepared for applying yet. So I don't know what I'll be able to do. But the point there was I just, selected the mesh deconstructor, applied it. Don't even think I need that. And then from there, we've got, all our parameters to start modifying things. This one in particular is animated. Let me see, where's this? So, we'll be able to do stuff like that. And then, you can compound these and stack them in the modifier stack to do all sorts of different effects. So I could apply the surface on top of that, and, that would be even more adaptive. So in that way, it becomes a bit of a motion graphics tool as well. So yeah, I mean, if I play around with this too much, then I will end up crashing Blender, but that's the principle of it. So hopefully you find that interesting. So Sharon, remind me if there's anything else I need to let people know about, because I cannot remember everything all by myself. Let me just turn that down. Let's just hop on over back to the... Oh, actually, maybe I can show you some of the other projects. Let's take a look at the embryo. There we go. Standard display for the embryo object. Now, my computer might not like the rendering intensity of this while streaming, so I'm sorry if my voice kind of cuts out. But here is the alien embryo object. This file is available on the members lounge for the patrons. This is the one where we have the shading variety based on the proximity definition. So we've got like several proximity based objects here. Distance sub and distance trans. Notice that the trans ones are inside of the object. In this project, we have the mesh object, and inside of the geometry nodes, we're basically just taking those objects and defining their proximity to the geometry, passing it through a flow curve, which gives us the threshold, or rather the fall off for the proximity. And then from there, we bring it into the shader. So I have a physical shader here. Then I bring in the subsurf proximity and basically mix the original physical shader with the subsurf version. Then I've got the trans input, so transmission, proximity, and then we mix that compounded physical plus subsurf with transmission, and then we pass that to the material output. There are two ways to modify the fall off. So the second way, I'll start from second and go backwards, is inside the shader here. And then the first way is inside of the geometry nodes. So if you're modifying the fall off in the geometry nodes, you don't necessarily need to modify it in the shader. So you might look at this and go, well, why are you modifying it here in the shader when we've already modified it in the geometry nodes? Just as a test, just leaving it there. Little John says, love the video you showed of this, and it had that wet look. Oh yes, so the coat, that was interesting. So, I mean, I discover things while doing videos talking about the projects. And one thing we discovered was that, I don't know if it'll be super easy in this lighting, was it? Yeah, transmission there. That if we increase the coat level, then we kind of cheat in giving it a bit of a wet look. So this is at a low coat level, it just looks kind of rubbery. And at a high coat level, gets a bit more of a wet look. Now, I didn't really notice that when originally, preparing the project files, but it's quite interesting that while recording the video and just messing around, that just kind of appeared as a technique. So, I mean, talking about demonstrating things for people, that's why I do think it's a good idea if you're learning something to also try and explain it to other people, because not only do you help to solidify it yourself, but also you may discover new things. So yeah, That's an interesting one. And again, one of the points about doing a geometry proximity based is that if it's an object that you are actively live sculpting on, then it will adapt to that dynamically. Now, I don't know if it's a good idea to be doing this with the geonodes on the tree, on the modifier stack, but it is disabled at the moment anyway. So I'm in din topo with the subdivide collapse of resolution of about 5 pixel if I take the snake hook. We're just going to see what happens because I haven't really modified this like since, but let me like bring that out. And we're just going to see how it reacts because these are the subsurf probes back here. And maybe by the time I update that. Yeah, see? Perfectly dynamic. And where we've got the sculpt coming out towards the subsurf probe there, you can see where it's affecting. May I ask what hardware you're using? Your tools are fantastic and your viewport rendering is very fast. So this one is a 1390 in this computer. It's an AMD CPU, but I can't remember which one it is, but I'll probably put it out on a list. I could do the kind of DX die. I can find out now, I suppose. Why don't I do that? Give me 2 secs. You might think, how does he not know exactly what hardware is running? There are about 5 desktops in this studio. They're not all this good. I have a bunch of old ones going on. But processor, AMD Ryzen 9 5950X, 16 core. You got about 64 gigabytes of RAM, and it's 3090. This was the computer I got from NVIDIA during our sponsorship back in October 2021, was it? I think, maybe. But yeah, so that's a little demonstration of how you can set up this physical spatial shader definition rig around where you're sculpting. And as you're doing the sculpting changes, you don't need to do any shader changes. Don't need to do any UV changes, any texture stuff, whatever. And it, just adapts. And I could move around, the distance sub object. I can make it longer, kind of going all the way around the shape. And one thing I haven't tried yet is using grease pencil to actually kind of define that, because that'd be so easy to edit. You literally just like sketch around, in theory, it would be like, I'll just go here or here, or I want transmission here, and then it would happen. All right. That would be really cool. So maybe I will sit down and do that sometime. Okay, so I think that might be it, unless when I kind of head off of this, I remember something else entirely. So this has just been a bit of like a test stream, and hopefully it kind of makes things a bit more interactive, and I will also pass it on to the patrons as well. Is there anything that's happened in the news? I need to pull it out of my brain. Okay, there's a lot of like drama stuff that's happened on YouTube and Twitch and that recently. Anything that's happened in the AI space? PewDiePie literally just put out a video about AI. I need to watch that. I've been part of conversations with other creators kind of complaining about the AI space. I've already done a video about AI, or a couple of them, and those have been quite controversial, so I've decided not to kind of talk about it again, at least not for a while, which kind of makes sense if you're, not really familiar with what it's like. It doesn't matter, whatever the discussion point is, if you try and be balanced, it's kind of disappointing when you try and share a balanced take about something, because people are not prepared to interact with balanced takes or to engage with the same kind of energy. It's always so like frustrating. You put a video out and you can tell when someone hasn't watched a video, you put a lot of effort into trying to make a discussion about something, because they get angry. They go, no, it's not this. I think it's this. But so often that's not a disagreement. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've read a comment of something that I agree with or something I've spoken about, but it's written in a way to make it sound like I haven't said that. Does that make sense? Like, a lot of people, they turn up to the videos, they type an opinion before they watch it, and then when that happens so much, you sit back and you think, well, what was the point of making the video then? Like, what was the point of sharing anything? Because if people aren't going to watch it, then I don't know. It kind of forms into like this dead internet theory a little bit. And it is something we've kind of noticed a little over the last couple of years. Things have gotten a bit quieter, like in the community space. And it's on social media, it's on YouTube, whatever. When we're like sharing techniques or just discussing things that are important, like in the industry, in the community, whatever, the amount of people talking about that thing or interacting with that is just sort of reduced. And I was part of an interesting discussion last night with some other Blender creators, and we were saying, yeah, it's gotten really quiet the last couple of years. It's not that people aren't using the software as much. It's not that people aren't engaging, like in terms of, views, likes, whatever. It's just that conversation is dying a little bit. And it's a really weird thing to explain. So there are oftentimes a lot of things that I would like to talk about on video. But I think now more, I just kind of sit back and I go, is there really a point to it? Or like, what will people get anything out of it? If I compared that with other work that I need to do, it's like, okay, well, I should probably just shut up and focus on things like that instead. But I suppose, there's an element of sometimes you do need to talk about things if they pass a threshold of being important enough. Some elements of the AI thing are important enough. And that's when I've, spoken about job security and stuff on videos in the past. But even then, it's a hard thing to get across to people for a topic that's so emotional. Agnew in the chat says, yeah, I feel you. Yeah, I mean, YouTube's been so weird, like, the last few years for the Blender space. I mean, in 2018, we had the Blender 2.8 Code Quest. That's when Blender transitioned from the 2.79 with the, the right-click select and all that, and the old user interface. Not the old user interface. I mean, 2.79 was still pretty sick, all things considered. But then it jumped to 2.8, and that's when things got far more modern, far more adaptive. I think that's when Eevee came in as well. Now, that was, I think, the start of the beginning of a rise in Blender popularity. It had a lot of attention around it, largely helped by oh my god, I just confused the words. Pablo Vasquez. I just tried to merge them two together. Through the, not exactly Blender Today, but he did I don't know if it was weekly or daily updates on the Blender 2.8 Code Quest. And that kind of really helped to amplify what was happening with the project, like what user interface changes were coming, what new features were coming. And then people started appearing more in the YouTube space. Before that, there was like a general contingent of Blender YouTubers, people like Gleb Alexandrov and that. They were making really good content, Andrew Price as well. Then after Blender 2.8, things really kicked off. And that's when I appeared. That's when CG Matter and Ducky appeared around the second half of 2018. And then from there, things just kind of spiraled. Like they grew and grew and grew, almost out of control, because of course then the pandemic happened a couple of years later. So everyone and their mum, or in my case, their dad, was learning Blender. That was really funny. And yeah, and it feels like now, we kind of hit that high peak. Things have homogenized, and now people are getting back to work. I think some dreams succeeded and some dreams failed, because I think a lot of people in the pandemic era learned Blender because they wanted to pursue and follow a dream. In some cases, it was, oh, let me just learn something and do something fun with the time I have in isolation. But I think for a lot of people, it was like a wake-up call to say, okay, well, I was not happy with my life, and now we're isolated. What can I do to try and improve it? So I think for a certain amount of people, Blender was that escape. And, they'd learned the skills and they started looking towards jobs. But the thing is, it just won't work out for everyone. I think that's part of why we've got that dip going on. And sure, part of it might just be that things get less popular over time. But I don't even think that's right, because Blender's not getting less popular. It's getting more popular. So these are weird things to talk about, because when you get to watch the community from a kind of top-down space like this, you start noticing these patterns, and they're not always easy to explain, but it's something that resonates throughout. So it resonates through your sense of interaction with people. You get a feeling for when people in the community are talking more or less about something. It resonates to the content you put out. So when people watch more or less or comment more or less, it's kind of weird. You have like a pulse on the space. Sharon says, pandemic and everyone being at home gave a lot of people time to dabble into Blender. Yeah, Blender and just other things in general. I think, we spent more time on YouTube, got inspired by the programs and shows that were coming out around the time. It was interesting. I remember seeing like some interesting news posts around that time talking about how a lot of people were the happiest they had ever been during the pandemic. Obviously, the pandemic was awful, a lot of people died, but there was this weird kind of flip side, psychologically speaking, when a lot of people who were depressed were no longer depressed and stuff like that. I think part of it was because all of a sudden there was a drop in expectation for people from society. So people that felt like they didn't have much control over their life or weren't doing the things they enjoyed or just felt like life every day was a slog suddenly got thrust into this situation where nothing was expected of them. They could do whatever they wanted and they wouldn't have to worry. So it's interesting how all that ties together. But yeah, I mean, all of that's just a really long way to say that I don't think Blender's going anywhere, but it has been interesting to see how community interaction has shifted over time. And, when speaking to other creators, it kind of feels like a lot of us are a bit disappointed with the lack of interaction now. Like, but again, I don't think it's that simple because I don't comment on other people's videos and I don't give advice really to like other creators or artists, especially, not unless it's asked for. So I don't think that the lack of interaction from people signifies that there's less of interest in something. I just think the nature of the interactions we're having has changed now in response to society, the changes in pressure, and maybe especially now that we're living through a cost of living crisis pretty much everywhere. So, yes. But if you've got any thoughts about that, then let me know. Now, let me just check. YouTube is giving me a notification about something. Start a Q&A, start a poll, members only. Nah, if I try and do anything, I'll probably get, cancelled for doing an offensive poll or something. All right, so I think that's probably where we should leave it. I don't want to drag it on for too long, unless anyone has a final question. If not, what I'll do is I'll put a 2-minute countdown. And if anyone posts something within 2 minutes, I will respond to that. If not, we'll leave it. So that 2-minute countdown has started now. What I'm going to do for the rest of the day is I need to write up the report for my patrons on October so we can start moving on to the November work. And then I've got stuff in I call it my communication matrix, which is where I've got a list of all the projects I need to do. So there's different kinds of product updates that I do need to start working on. For example, the Afterglow display case will be one of them, but there are others as well. I've also got content to ingest from people that I've paid to make things for my patrons. Little tests, I call them micro grants. So I need to get on with actually kind of finishing packaging those up and then moving them on to Patreon. There's things in there like there's material patterns, procedural patterns. There's like kind of 2D source material. Donna gave us a really fantastic new procedural metal like base for a material, which should hopefully contribute more towards the modular metals remake in the future. Hopefully I'll find time to get to that. So there's all these things to ingest as well. And I think we've got Blender 5.0 coming out in November, right? I'm not sure about that. Maybe, yeah, full release. So that'll be interesting. We'll have to do a breakdown for that as well. And then just take a look at all the different features coming. There's a lot of geometry node stuff in there, man. But like, I don't know how to keep on top of it. Thankfully, I've got people like Ben and Sharon to keep me up to date on what the actual features will mean for the future. And Azzy, my co-partner on Hex Scatter, has let me know that possibly there may be a way to optimize the Hex Scatter project so that we don't need the preamble nodes. If you don't know what that is, Hex Scatter is our way of kind of solving the triplanar mapping issue, or rather projecting non-seamless textures around any shape object. And we came up with a really great solution to do it using hexagonal tiles to maximize surface area, and then using height map data to inform the borders of the hexagonal tiles, how to blend together. And I think it's the best solution out there. But it seems like there may be a great way to optimize it coming up as well. So I think that's about it. Hi, Spencer. We're just about to end now. Oh, Spencer Magnuson makes add-ons. You should check him out. Have fun. All right, thank you for watching, everyone. Stay safe, and I will see you. Oh no, emoji. Put the unicorn emoji in the chat, and then I think I'll be able to watch it back. I don't know. I'll figure this out. See ya.